Okay, welcome back, nerds. Last time I think I said I didn't know what this episode was going to be. That was true, but we are actually going to do kind of like a Q and A. So not so much a slideshow, no Google Maps. If you're like a map aficionado, I'm sorry, but I've gotten well, I've gotten like 3 comments on the videos, and you know what? I'll take it. But I have gotten a few kind of direct messages or just interactions with friends where they had questions, and I thought, you know what? Why don't we answer some of these questions on kind of like a bigger platform so that it's not just like a one-on-one kind of a thing. And then at the end, we're going to do a little demo because I love demos, and it was inspired by some questions from my friend Molly, with whom I actually just had wine. So it's going to be great. Okay, so to address some of the comments first, so Ellie, I know it's been like 9 months since you commented on the video about pairing. I'm so sorry about just now getting back to you. Anytime you want to talk about pairing, I'm so down. And for everyone else, anytime you want to talk about pairing, I'm very into pairing. I'm learning a lot of like unusual wines now. So we've talked about a lot of very like kind of like more commonplace grapes, but now I'm thinking like, okay, what would pair well with like a riccatatelli? What do we want to have with that? Or if you have a food that's kind of unusual, is there something beyond the norm that we can pair it with? So hit me up anytime. I'm really bad about answering texts, but if they're about wine, I'm actually much better at answering them. So shoot me a message on YouTube or on Instagram. Also, if you follow me on Instagram, you will know this is actually take 2 of this video, because the first one, right before I started recording, and I totally didn't notice the cats turned off the microphone. So I have this whole video that has absolutely no sound. And I was like, great. Well, that's what I get for not double checking. Okay, Eric, yes, I also try to avoid corporate wrath, which is why I always try to make sure everything is credited. I don't try to take credit for anything that I did not do or I did not think up. Try to make sure everybody gets what they're due. Please, if you are a corporation, I don't have enough money for you to sue me. Please don't sue me. Just tell me. I'll take a video down. I'll edit a video, whatever. And then last but not least, Trouble, I'm so glad that you got to know about Sanso. It's definitely one of my new favorite grapes. I had it in a rosé blend tonight. I think it was Grenache Syrah Sanso, also great, just like a touch of that violet. Hit me up on IG and I'll see if I can like Grubhub you a bottle of just like single varietal Sanso. I'm kind of obsessed with it. That and Menthea, of course. Okay, those are like my whopping 3 comments on my YouTube videos. Now for some questions I've gotten, DMs, Instagrams, interactions, whatever. Is there fruit in wine besides grapes? So I talk a lot about like, oh, I get notes of cherry, I get notes of raspberry. This white wine has a lot of pear or green apple. Wine is fermented grape juice. Like all of those flavors come from the grapes and the vinification process. So ambient yeast is kind of like its own thing with natural wine. And then there are whole like catalogs of yeast that say, you know, if you mix this yeast with this grape, it's going to bring out these flavors. And if you mix this yeast with these grapes, it's going to bring out these flavors. And so you're basically just like kind of pulling those flavors from the grapes. So obviously there are Concord grape wines that taste a lot like Concord grape jelly, and those tend to be the less expensive wines. But it is really just the grape juice that has all of those flavors, which is part of what I think makes mine wine both very scientific and also kind of magical. It is truly a science and an art. Just eliciting all those flavors from the wine. Now, there are fruit wines. So like when I was in Alaska, we had a salmonberry wine. I don't really remember it except that I liked it. It might have been pretty sweet, to be honest. And you can, I mean, you can make fermented fruit juice out of any fruit. You can make fermented peach juice. You can make fermented strawberry juice. There are wineries that offer those fermented juices. I think Blueberry is a popular one. I even think Neshoba Winery, which is kind of near me, they might have some that are fermented fruit juices. They're not technically wines. They are just fermented fruit juice, but still fun, still awesome. Those have fruits in them. True wine does not, just grapes. Okay, what's with decanting and what is double decanting? Because I think I've mentioned double decanting a couple times. So decanting, for the most part, exposes your wine to oxygen. So with a lot of your like less expensive, young, fresh wines, there's no like true reason to decant, but it also isn't going to hurt So if you have time to decant, that's great. Like, it's not going to make your wine worse. With your fragile wines, so I'm talking like aged Burgundies or like a really old Barolo, you're mostly decanting for sediment. So I think I've done some videos where you kind of like pour, and in the neck of the bottle, you'll see all those like tartrate crystals. You want to catch those because it's not bad to drink them. Like, it's not going to make you sick or anything like that. It's just not pretty. It's not a good visual to drink these crystals. So you're catching a lot of those. And that's the point of decanting for your older ones. But you'll only leave it in the decanter for maybe 15 to 30 minutes max, because at this point, the aromatics are very fragile and you don't want them to get overwhelmed by the oxidation. Also, for the most part, we're only talking about red wines. There's really no reason to ever decant a white wine, and you could really ruin the very fragile aromatics of the white wines by decanting. And double decanting, there are specific double decanters where you kind of like pop the decanter into the bottle, you turn it over, it all goes into the decanter, you turn it back over, it all goes into the wine bottle. I do it the cheap DIY way, where I pour the wine into the decanter, I put a funnel in my wine bottle, and I pour it back into the wine bottle. And that sort of gets like a lot of oxygen on the wine. And I do it especially with very inexpensive wines. And then I'll chill them a little bit to pass them off as like a little bit better than they are. So double decanting is pretty popular for kind of like getting those wines ready. And especially if you don't have, like, if a wine is recommended to decant for an hour and you don't have an hour because, like me, you didn't plan ahead, you can double decant, and that'll kind of speed up the process. Do I really need special glasses? All right, so as we all know, I'm kind of anti-flute because flute makes it hard, especially if you've got like a prominent nose like I do. You can't get your nose in the glass. You can't really get the aromatics. But I am a big fan of any sort of tapered wine glass, because then the aromatics stay inside. You can get your nose in it. It gives oxygen exposure to the wine. I don't know if you guys can hear Peaches, but he really wants to be part of this video. So I use these for both white and red wine. I don't really differentiate. Technically, your white wine glasses maybe should be a little bit smaller to keep those aromatics fresh and safe. It's kind of up to you. I mean, I think as long as you're not like, if your glass goes out like this, then you're losing a lot of the aromatics, and that's less great. But if that's what you like and it fits your aesthetic, pour less wine and drink it faster, I guess. I guess is my thoughts. Okay, what temperature do I really serve my wine? So first and foremost, they kind of say, you know what, whatever temperature you like it. So if you really like your wine chilled, you can serve it chilled. If you really like your wine room temperature, you can serve it room temperature. The general rule of thumb is to keep the whites a little more chilled and the reds a little less chilled. When you chill, you can lose some of the fruit flavors, so your reds will seem very tannic. And it's the same reason that we kind of like have to explain to people, you typically don't chill orange wines. Yes, they are white grapes, but because they have so much skin contact, if you chill them, you end up with a lot of tannins. And because the aromatics of whites are a little more fragile, you tend to lose those aromatics. But we'll go straight to the source, my WSET textbook. And your typical guidelines are, for medium or full-bodied white wines, you want to do lightly chilled at 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 to 13 Celsius. For your lighter, medium-bodied white wines, you'll do chilled, which is colder, at 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit and 7 to 10 degrees Celsius. Sweet wines are well chilled. So we're talking like Sauterne or ice vine. We're just talking about ice vine in a class I took, and now I really want some. Those will be well chilled at 43 to 46 Fahrenheit or 6 to 8 Celsius. So these are pretty cold. Your sparkling wines, so your, champagnes, Prosecco's, etc., those will also be well chilled, but technically it's 6 to 10 Celsius and 43 to 50 Fahrenheit. So you can get a touch warmer with those. Your light-bodied reds, so you're going to do lightly chilled. So we're talking 55-ish, 50 to 60 Fahrenheit, and then around 13 Celsius. Your medium to full-bodied reds, you're going to do room temperature. Room temperature is actually a specific range. So if you're in Arizona and your room is like 110 degrees, that's not what we mean. room temperature is considered between 59 to 64 Fahrenheit. So I hope you're keeping your AC on, because that is not what my room temperature is in the summer, which is about 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. So there you go. There's your guidelines. But honestly, just play around, drink wines at different temperatures, see where you like them. I spend a lot of times, especially if I'm at somewhere like a wine bar that serves their wines by the glass, they keep them chilled to keep them good. And so I spend a lot of time with my hands around the glass like this to warm it up a little so I can get the aromatics, especially if it's a white or a sparkling. There's your temperature, right, kind of like guidelines. What is a true serving of wine? It's however much you want. If you want to put the whole bottle in the glass, go for it, honestly. No, okay. Also, as a caveat, I have to once again say, if you are concerned that you have a problem, there are lots of resources available. I am never pressuring anyone to drink. If you want to come to a wine tasting and spit everything, if you want to come to a wine tasting and have ginger ale and like just watch people, more power to you. But a serving of wine tends to be about 2 ounces for port, or sherry, I think also, about 4 ounces for sparkling wine, and then 5 to 6 ounces for all your still wines. I typically just go with 5 ounces for sparkling and still, so this is probably about 5 ounces in my glass right here. I've gotten decent at eyeing it. Poured a lot of wine. And then just because ports are so strong, you tend to not need a whole lot. They're also higher alcohol, so you serve them a little less. A glass, or a glass, goodness gracious, a bottle will give you about 6 4-ounce pours or 4 6-ounce pours. So if you are planning a party for people, you can say, okay, like I have this many wines, I have this many people, I want to pour approximately this many ounces. How many bottles do I need? You're going to do 4 6 6 4. That's pretty much your average. I guess it would also be 5 5, but for some reason I always just habitually go to 4 and 6 for some reason. I'm looking at my list of questions. We'll get to this. We'll get to this question during the demonstration. Okay, sulfites. A lot of wines say they contain sulfites. For some reason, people are obsessed with like, oh, sulfites give me the headaches. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I may lose some, what am I, like 2 followers for this. There are more sulfites in trail mix than there are in wines. So if you have a sulfite sensitivity, 1, you probably know, and 2, you're probably not having trail mix or wine. If you are blaming wine for your headaches and you don't have a known sulfite sensitivity, you should consider, 1, you might just be drinking too much, which is completely fair. Like I have definitely overdone it. Also, you could be having higher sugar wines. So if you're having less expensive wines, which is very reasonable, they tend to have a little bit higher sugar and also just some more general chemical additives. I think we've talked a little bit about chaptalization. We've talked about like acidification. They just add things to the wine to make them taste the same year after year. So some of those chemicals may be giving you a little bit of a headache, and especially sugar. Like I get wild sugar headaches. So that's one of the reasons I stick with like Brut, Extra Brut, and Brut Nature sparkling wines. It may also be tannins. So if you find that you don't get headaches with white wine, but you do get them with red wine, you may have a tannin sensitivity, in which case you can look for like lower tannin red. So sometimes Pinot Noir doesn't spend as long of a time on the skins. So I'm torn about the Beaujolais because of the carbonic maceration. Rosés are probably a safe bet if you have a tannin sensitivity. And then last but not least, a lot of findings have been recent. Recent findings? Anyway, there's a histamine sensitivity. So if you have allergies or you want to just experiment and take some like Claritin or Zyrtec or some other antihistamine before you drink, and then you don't have a headache, you probably just have a histamine sensitivity, and there are histamines in wine. So a lot of different reasons you can get headaches, not usually sulfites. So all those like drops that you put in your wine or like the special filters that you stir around, kind of just taking your money. I'm sorry if that's like bad news for you, but also placebo effect. If you believe it's the sulfites and like doing anti-sulfite things are working for you, just ignore me and keep doing it, because whatever lets you drink your wine and be happy. Carbs and sugar. So we'll do a little nutrition lesson here. 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories. 1 gram of protein is also 4 calories. 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. And so that's why we talk about density. Those are the 3 macronutrients. What most people don't talk about is alcohol. And alcohol is not a macronutrient, and it's also not a micronutrient, but it is 7 calories per gram. When you do the whole fermentation process, the yeast eats the sugar. There's not sugar anymore. There aren't really carbs anymore. It's just the alcohol. Your body processes alcohol like carbs or fat. So when your body gets the alcohol, first of all, it prioritizes that. It doesn't metabolize anything else until it metabolizes all of the alcohol. And the reaction in your body is very similar to carbs or fat. But if you're worried about carbs, this isn't really where to worry about it. And when you see all those wines, they're like, oh, we're only X number of carbs per. That's nonsense. It's just a marketing tactic. And like, I get it. It's smart marketing, especially with all the people doing low carb. But your body will still process that alcohol very similar to a carb. So if you're doing like low carb or keto or whatever, it's going to kick you out of that because of the way it processes. So honestly, first of all, if you're drinking alcohol, maybe we're not so worried about it. And second, just don't buy into all of those marketing ploys. And a lot of those like low carb, low sugar alcohols are just alcohol that's been watered down. So pick something you love, enjoy it in a small amount, and just don't worry about it. Those are my thoughts. All right, moving on. How do I store my wine after opening it? I have a lot of visuals for this. Okay, so you can get little stoppers. I had another cute one. Okay, here we go. We have 2 different metal, so ball point with rubber. So this one's like grooved, this one's not grooved. This one's my cute Love is Love Pride. This is my turtle. And you just pop them in the bottle. This kind of like has a little bit of a seal. It'll last a couple days in the fridge. It'll keep it a little bit fresher than just like sticking it in the fridge. I also have this one that is pretty much straight silicone. It's called a Houdini. And because it is a little more flexible and it has a little more give to it, it does seal just a tiny bit better. I also have these that I discovered recently, and these, again, they're rigid but flexible, which is kind of strange. So they're also a really nice seal. And then I have the aerator ones. I had a bottle, but I don't know what I did with it. So you basically pop these in, you put this on it, and when you do this, Amos just got so alarmed. You're basically like, you suck the air out and then you just repressurize it, and then you suck the air out and you repressurize it. So it takes as much of the oxygen as possible out of it without being a Coravin. Coravin blankets with nitrogen, not nitrous, I don't remember what it blankets with, not oxygen. So you keep the wine from oxidizing. For your sparkling wines, they have some cool ones. I don't have them. You push it down into the bottle and then you kind of like close these little, I don't know, they're little like hinged things, and that keeps your sparkling wine safe. You can also just shove a cork in the bottle, or you can just drink the whole bottle. Kidding. Am I kidding? Unclear. Lots of ways to store your wines. Kind of just find what works the best for you. How do I store my wine when it's not open? All right, so here we get back into the screw caps and the corks. Screw caps you can store upright because that's how they were designed. They're oxygen tight, air tight, whatever. Screw cap does not mean cheap. Screw cap is great. If you have a wine that has a cork, you need to store it horizontally with potentially a slight tilt. Your goal is to keep the cork wet, because if a cork gets dry, it starts to flake, it starts to like give, and oxygen can get into the bottle, and you do not want oxygen in your wine before you are ready to drink it. So upright with a screw top, horizontal with a cork, keep the cork wet. So whatever you need to do to kind of like make your cellar work for you, just roll with it. Faults. Okay. I grabbed my textbook because I didn't want to get these faults incorrect. There are a few faults. The primary one is called cork taint, which is also trichloroanisole or TCA. And you can tell when you have that because it will smell gross. It smells like musty, wet cardboard that got left in the basement and like kind of started to mold. It's not good. You can pretty much tell immediately. Oxidation. Now, sometimes there's purposeful oxidation, which will give you like a nutty, caramelly, dried apple. That's great. If you have not purposeful, accidental oxidation, you'll get like a very bitter, kind of think of like, is it walnut skins, I think, pecan skins that are like very bitter in like not a good way. And sometimes you'll have almost like rotten dried fruit. So not good dried fruit, bad dried fruit. That's that is oxidation. Volatile acidity, also called just VA. That's basically, well, that's not the one I was thinking of. That's the one that kind of smells like vinegar. So if you open it and you're like, wow, this is really vinegary. You can give it a quick taste to make sure, because sometimes you just need to like blow off some stuff that happens in the bottles. That's a thing in wine. But if it also tastes like vinegar, that's not good. You need to not drink that one. Ethyl acetate is the one I was just thinking of, and that's the one that smells like nail polish remover. Now, I was just having wine, as I said, with a friend of mine. She's like, why does it smell like a nail salon? That was actually the smokiness and just the way the smokiness expressed to her. So again, if your gut is that it's bad, you can still take a small sip, swish it, spit it. Don't drink it. And then if you're like, oh, actually, this tastes fine, and it's probably fine. If you're like, oh, no, this tastes like nail polish remover, not good, faulted, don't drink it. You can also have excess sulfur dioxide. You will probably know because it'll smell kind of like wet wool or a matchstick or even a little bit like rotten eggs. Britannomyces is tough because if you get barnyard, but you like it and it's pleasant, then it's not a fault. If you don't like it and it's gross, then it is a fault, which kind of goes along with a discussion I just had with someone about Rieslings, where I like when there's a little bit of petrol on the nose. A lot of people also consider that a fault. So it depends on who you're talking to. I think it's great. You can't really taste it. You just get it on the nose. Some people say that's a major fault. Don't drink it, blah, blah, blah. Kind of a personal preference. Britannomyces is kind of the same way. And then last but not least, you can get hydrogen sulfide, which also will smell like rotten eggs and can sometimes also smell like onions. And the part where it gets tricky is it may smell like rubber, in which case you have to decide, is this like a good smoky burning tire rubber that you like mezcal, or is this a bad rubber? So again, one of those faults that's kind of hard to tell sometimes. Now, when you order wine at a restaurant, they will often either bring you the cork to smell, or they will give you a quick splash to smell and taste. This is not for you to decide if you like the wine. That decision has come and gone. Hopefully you did your research, you talked to the sommelier, you know what you're doing, you've asked me. If you don't like the wine, I'm sorry to break this to you, but like that's not a reason to send it back. Like that's already done. If it is faulted, that is a reason to send it back. So if you smell it and it's like, this is musty cardboard, awful cork taint, then send it back. If you drink it and you're like, wow, I really don't like this red cherry flavor, them's the breaks, kids, as they say. I don't think anyone says that anymore. I think that's pretty much it. I think we are on to our demonstration. I'm sorry I'm like all over the place. It has just been a wild couple of days, but I'm excited about this demonstration. So when Molly and I were at the wine bar, I've mentioned Molly a bunch of times, I mentioned something about having had a white Merlot, and she said, how is that possible? Like, you can't have a white red wine. And I went, wow, I never thought about this. Like, just the structure and color of wines isn't super talked about. So I have a demonstration in my little shot glasses. These are peeled grapes. Oops, that actually happened in yesterday's video too. Also put them in my hands. Oh, God, that's gross. Yep, so I peeled the skins off of these grapes. One of them is a white grape and one of them is a red grape. I guess you can kind of like tell this one's like a little bit darker. You may not know which one I'm talking about. Anyway, they both have white flesh. Now, some grapes do have red flesh. Actually, Gewürztraminer has a little bit of like a pinkish flesh, which is why that white wine tends to be darker. But it's the skins. The skins is what gives grapes their color. So we're going to do a little demonstration where we're going to take this grape This went a lot better yesterday. Oh yeah, there we go. We're gonna squeeze some juice out of it. It's going terribly. Oh, hi, Peaches. This is definitely a great time for you to jump up on the table. Okay, we'll drop that in there. We'll squeeze one more so we have some more juice. It's not. Hey, buddy. You're so perfect. Oh, sprayed myself with grape juice. I'm gonna call that good enough. Now we'll do the red grapes. Bear with me. I promise this is fun. This is science. Everybody loves science. I didn't like science until I got into wine, and now I love science. We'll do one more. The red grapes are a little bit smaller, so we have to have 3-to-2 ratio here to get similar amounts of juice. All right, so I have squeezed out these grape juices. Really awkward to do. I would argue, okay, this one's like it is a tiny bit pinker. These are also not wine grapes. These are table grapes. Like I bought these at the grocery store. But I would say, I mean, they're both fairly pale. If I gave you these, you wouldn't say, oh, this is a red wine. I hope. I'm staring at you right now saying, don't say this is a red wine. They are both fairly pale in terms of the juice that they produce. So what makes a red wine red is the time on the skins. The juice that comes from the grapes tends to be a very similar color. So you can have a white red wine if you just don't spend any time on the skins. That's also kind of how we get the rosé, is just less time on the skins, or a very short time with the skins, or however you want to think about it. So that's my fun visual for you. I hope you enjoyed that demonstration. Hey, Peaches, do you want some grape juice? Hey, buddy. No? Okay. Well, now I have grape juice all over my hands. I hope this answered some of your questions. Thanks again for bearing with me. I'm not going to say I didn't have a glass of wine before this video, but I honestly don't think at this point anyone would know, because all the videos are pretty ADHD. If you have any more questions, send them along. I love answering them. There is no question that is dumb about wine. People say all the time there are no stupid questions, and I'm always like, that's not exactly true. But honestly, with wine, like, it's so wild, and there's so many weird things. No matter what your question is, no matter how much you're like, I'm kind of embarrassed to ask this question, ask it. This is a safe space. NerdVine is a safe space for all the questions. Send them along. I meant to look up this time because I didn't last night what next week's episode will be. It might be pet nads. I don't know for sure, honestly, but I will see you next week for an episode surprise. Hi, Amos.